My mum actually said to me, she cried so much and she said to me, I would have rather you have told me you were a prostitute. And I'm just like, no one speak. They can't know we're Muslim. And the guard realizes that we're all Muslim and he points his gun at me. I got a phone call because I was signed to an agent and my agent called me. And he was shouting at me on the phone, how are you losing your career? What are you doing? It was going to be a world tour. So it'd be hotels paid for, flights paid for. It was a dream. You can only be Jewish if your mom's Jewish. It was almost like a shame. I felt with it. I don't know why.
So can you tell us about your
Stage life before Islam.
your career as a presenter?
I was around the music industry. I was quickly around quite a lot of celebrities. Majority of them, the same ones who you see smiling on the camera, were absolutely miserable or lost or confused because they're not genuinely being themselves when they're on camera. God, please, if Islam is the truth, just guide me. And I said to myself, I'm not fighting this anymore. I could die tomorrow. I need to become a Muslim.
Assalamu alaikum, Sister Khalil Lister. Thank you for accepting our invitation. We are very happy to have you with us as eternal passenger.
I want to start with
Who is Khalil Lister? Can you tell us briefly about your background?
Walaikum salam. I was born in northwest London. I grew up in a house where my family were all in the performing world. My great aunt, she owned and she started up a lot of the theatre companies in the UK. My cousin signed by Sony. Like, this was our life and what I was very much around. So from a very early age, I went to stage school. I was always performing. Then when I became a teenager, I rebelled. I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere and I was probably trying to find myself, and I left home, I left school at 14 and I got in with all different kinds of people. It definitely wasn't a straight journey. It took a long time to get back here.
So can you tell us about your
stage life before Islam.
your career as a presenter?
I was around the music industry and I was quickly around quite a lot of celebrities. The more I was working in those fields, and I ended up working on places like BBC One Extra, Kiss FM. I was doing quite big presenting on radio shows and hosting for really huge celebrities. So I would go out onto stages with thousands in the audience, and that was just, it was my bread and butter. I was getting paid very young. It was the glitz and the glam, but the reality of that is that it wasn't as it seemed, which I learned pretty quickly.
So you said that you spent quite some time with celebrities. As you know, they have a shiny, glamorous light from the outside. Is that really the case from the inside? And do you have any interesting stories to tell us?
I think that is something that, funnily enough, led me to question my whole existence of life. Because as someone who was in the performing world, who was constantly around these people who you look at from the outside. Now, bearing in mind, in that time, we didn't have Instagram. So it was all paparazzi or interviews on TV. But you look at that and you look at them and they're doing their dream and they have the cars and the money and everything that they would want, the success in their talent. So you would think that they are on top of the world and they found external happiness. And what I would find is in the after parties, majority of them, the same ones who you see smiling on the camera, were absolutely miserable or lost or confused. If I asked them, why are you not happy? You've got everything. They would say, I don't feel like I have it. I don't feel like I'm there yet. None of them felt like they were standing in the success. They felt like they were standing next to the success and looking at it from an outward angle. And so I would think to myself, even though I was pretty young, I would always think to myself, there's got to be more life than this. How can it be that these people who we idolize on the outside, people literally scream at, are still not feeling happy? And I think I quickly concluded it's because they're not genuinely being themselves when they're on camera. They're having to be a persona. They're having to act in a way that society wants them to come across as. And so internally, they don't feel complete. I remember being at one particular after party, and I'm not going to mention names. I don't think that I would be able to, but there were very big celebrities in the hip-hop industry that were really huge. If you walk down the street, people are screaming and taking pictures, and I remember walking through with them, and then they sat down and they'd finished everything. This one particular male celebrity, he almost looked like he'd given up on life. I mean, my daughter's not that much younger than that, so I was still pretty much a child, and this is a big adult who we look at and we think is so incredible, and he's screaming and they're not in their mind. And I just remember thinking to myself, I don't want this life. You're doing this as an escapism. And that was what became very apparent, that yes, they had a talent, or yes, they had become successful, but there was still all these traumas that they hadn't healed. There was still an emptiness inside. I think that was a huge moment in my life, and it was very soon after that I really went on a deep soul searching journey.
What was the thing that made you question your beliefs? You said that you were impacted by this individual, and was it an event or a thought, and when was it?
When I was just turning 13 and my grandfather died, and we were really, really close. And that was the first time, I would say, before this second incident, where when he died, it was horrible, because when you don't have faith and someone dies and it's the end, I just remember feeling like there was a black hole over my head, and I had no idea, where's he gone? Can he even hear me? There has to be more. Why would he just be here to die? And I think that was the first time when I was just about to turn 13 that I ever really contemplated deeply that I would like there to be more. But it was then I just was rebellious, and I left home, and I was all over the place and doing my dream career. So I thought, and it was only again that it really shook me to my core when I was around these big celebrities and realizing that this is not what it means to be happy. There's something missing, and I really started to look into faith. My heart was just called to faith, but again, I did look into a lot of religions. I didn't ever consider Islam because it just felt so foreign.
How did you first hear about Islam? How was your first exposure to Islam?
So my best friend at the time that I was staying with in Southwest London, a lot of the time we were in a very similar field, we did the work together. She became Muslim, and I actually don't know how she became Muslim. I actually don't know the story behind what caused her to convert, but she became Muslim, and she didn't tell me I'm looking into Islam. She told me I'm a Muslim, and I was completely shocked. I could not believe it, and I thought, you're throwing your life away. Honestly, that's what I thought, because we were in that world together. I really thought that she was throwing her life away, that her career would be over, that she wouldn't be able to do anything. But then I started to see how much she changed.
So what was the thing that really compelled you to consider Islam? What was the thing that made you this understanding and belief, this might be the right religion for me?
When I did start to go on my soul-searching journey, I did first look into Judaism because that was the natural thing to do. It's what my family were. And I really could not comprehend for a second how the religion believes that unless you're born into it, and by the way, the people who call themselves the true Jews, they will tell you that you can only be Jewish if your mom's Jewish, so it's a blood right. And they truly believe that no one else could be a Jew, no one else could enter into the faith. And so I really thought to myself, why would there be so many other beautiful cultures and ethnicities and all this rich, beautiful people in this world just to be made to go to the hellfire? I couldn't comprehend that. I didn't want to comprehend it. So I looked in Christianity. Again, my heart was always on monotheism. Although I didn't know what the creator was, I couldn't understand how there could be three, but it's one, but he died, but he's alive. My brain couldn't understand that. So it was finally when she became Muslim and started to just tell me, the main thing that really struck me was anyone can be a Muslim. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter how many sins you've committed. And I really understood that this is a religion that doesn't judge you. As long as you believe in one God and you accept all the prophets and all the messengers, everyone has a chance. And I just thought, this has to be the truth. This has to be the truth. Why would God create us to be destined to the hellfire?
What was the thing that made you
Take the final step.
towards becoming a Muslim?
I kept praying. So I would even wake up for Fajr with my friend because I was staying with her, and she'd pray Fajr as a Muslim. She'd make wudu, and I would sit behind her and I would put my hands up and I would just say, God, please, if Islam is the truth, just guide me. And I kept begging for a sign. I just wanted something. Allah knows what people need to guide them. And it was then that I had a dream, and this dream shook me to my core. It was illegal to be a Muslim, and I was a Muslim in the dream, and myself and a whole bunch of other people were in prison because we were Muslim, because it was a complete crime to be. So we were locked up, and the prison was full of guards with huge guns, and it was a really scary, really dark, run-down place. There were rats everywhere. If you were allowed out of your cell, if you were lucky, there was a huge courtyard just to let you stretch your legs or run around, get some exercise. And across the other side of the courtyard, you could see a fence. And behind the fence were loads of Muslims. And it was safe. The guards couldn't touch them. They were safe, and they had banners, and they were protesting to get the Muslims out. And it was safe there. And they were shouting, La ilaha illallah. And some people were able to escape over. If you could get over, you were free. So I was plotting and planning to get us out. Not just me, but everyone. So I told everyone that we had to go and get changed, look like we weren't Muslim, And I can't remember what we wore, anything like that, but I just remember coming out into the courtyard and the guards not realizing we're Muslim, but thinking, this is strange, who are they? And they start following us with their guns. And I'm just like, no one speak. They can't know we're Muslim. And suddenly someone next to me says, Alhamdulillah. And the guard realizes that we're all Muslim. And he points his gun at me, this huge gun, and he points at me and he fires. And it was literally, I remember it like it was yesterday. I can see it still so vividly in my mind. The bullet starts to come out in slow motion. And it's then I realized Allah can save me. Why am I fearing a human when it's Allah, when it's God who has the power to do anything? So I put my fear aside and I put my trust in God and I start saying, Allahu Akbar. Everyone around me starts to shout Allahu Akbar, and the bullet reverses and it goes back towards the guard. The part that got me the most is it was in that moment that a breeze, like a light, gentle breeze came and it picked us all up, all of the Muslims, and it lifted us up and took us over the fence. When I woke up and I told my friend about this dream, she started to cry. And bearing in mind, I hadn't really read the Quran. I hadn't read anything. I didn't really know any hadith. I didn't have a lot of knowledge. I just knew that I loved Islam. I was like, this is the truth. I really understood the depth of this dream. I said to myself, I'm not fighting this anymore. I could die tomorrow. I need to become a Muslim. And I don't even think it was a week before I took my shahada.
How did you take your shahada? Did you go to a mosque? How did that happen and how did you feel?
I went to Baker Street Station and I got off the train and I went through the ticket barriers, and I remember these three sisters standing there with big flowers, and they had my first ever headscarf. They helped me put on a headscarf and they walked me down to Regent's Park Mosque, Baker Street Masjid, which is the big, beautiful mosque in central London. And I went downstairs into the Imam's office and he told me to repeat after him, and that's when I took my shahada. I felt like I was born again. I felt like every sin, every experience was just lifted away and I had a fresh sheet. I felt scared because I didn't know how I was going to continue, what I was going to do, where I was going to go, how my family would take it. And I also felt scared because the Imam asked me the 6 pillars of Imán when I took my shahada, and I had no idea what that was. So I felt like, oh my God, I can't be a Muslim. But he explained to me something that has stuck with me since that day, which is 17 years ago. And he said, even if you put your finger in the ocean, the knowledge on that drip is nothing compared to the whole ocean of knowledge that you'll need to learn for the rest of your life. You can never stop learning. It's always going to be a journey of learning. We know nothing. Allah's knowledge is so vast.
How did your family
And the people around you react to your conversion to Islam?
That my sister, who was 14 at the time, 1 month after I took my shahada, she took hers. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. So I actually gave her a book called The Illustrated Guide to Islam, which explains the science behind Islam, because I'm more of an emotional soul and she's more of a logical one. That really helped her to understand that these miracles were there before science. So she took her shahada, but she was very young. So I had to tell my mom that I was Muslim. My mom actually said to me, she cried so much, and she said to me, I would have rather you have told me you were a prostitute than a Muslim. And I couldn't believe that she would have this view on Islam. Obviously, the reality is that my family still hold on to that, the larger family. So a lot of them, me being a Muslim, is a huge shock. But for my actual family, we didn't grow up with a strong sense of faith.
After your shahada, you received a job offer from the owner of $1 million
Record company.
What was your answer and what influenced that decision?
Yeah, I got a phone call because I was signed to an agency, and my agent called me and he said, "You've made it." I said, "I've made what?" He said, "You've done it. You've got the job." The long hours in the studio, the rehearsing, they've selected you. And I mean, there were hundreds of people who'd applied for this job, and I was chosen, and it was going to be to tour and host this huge celebrity and to go on before and after his performance and really hype up the crowd and talk to the crowd. And I'd be able to speak some poetry that I did. And it was going to be a world tour. So it'd be hotels paid for, flights paid for. It was a dream. I was so excited and I couldn't believe it. And then suddenly I remembered, Alhamdulillah, I'm a Muslim. Yeah, I said to him, I can't do it. And he was shouting at me on the phone, "How are you losing your career? What are you doing?" And I just knew I couldn't. But I really had no idea at the time how I could continue using my voice as a Muslim. So I really stopped everything from that day for a very long time before I understood how I could start speaking up again. But this time, Alhamdulillah, as a Muslim woman.
So there was a gap in your career that after you became Muslim, it was a pause.
I think it was about 14 years before I understood that there are ways of speaking and using your voice powerfully in a positive way, which is how I landed up going on to dream stages like Tedex and other such amazing platforms, alhamdulillah. As a fully covered woman, I went and I studied with some of the greatest public speakers in the world.
So you gave a speech at TEDx. Have you experienced any challenges as a TEDx speaker with niqab? Have people ask you interesting questions or react to you in a different way before, during, or after your talk because of that?
So my TEDx was with a white male, non-Muslim, in Santa Barbara, California. And he said to me, I've never had the opportunity to have a conversation with a Muslim woman before. So I don't think the area that he was in was very multicultural, at least there weren't many Muslims. So this was the first opportunity for him. And that TEDx that I spoke on, that I was at, it was an interview with him. There was also a producer who worked in Hollywood and a lot of high to-dos in this industry. And I think they came in with some preconceptions towards Islam, because he asked me, how do your community feel about you speaking? How do they feel about you coming on here? And he was really shocked when I told him that Khadija was an entrepreneur. She was a businesswoman and we look up to her and we love her. And it was amazing. She was a strong woman. And he was just completely, he let out an almost shocked laugh, because he was so in shock that we had this woman married to our prophet who was a businesswoman. And I have encountered that with a lot of people who've heard my TEDx and messaged me and said, this has really changed my perception. And to be able to be on a platform that has over 1 billion viewers and to be able to bring forth a topic that is so needed, cultural misconception, was such an amazing moment. And to know that Allah always replaces what you give up for his sake with better. And for me, this was a moment that just proved that to me, that when I gave up speaking, that celebrity, or Allah, may Allah accept it, I was given something so much better.
People who are not sure about converting to Islam might have a concern. They might say, if I revert, then I will lose all my joys in life. So let me ask you, has your life become boring after Islam?
We might think about going out and going to parties or whatever it is, but I can honestly tell you that in those days, they were some of the darkest moments of my life. Despite outwardly it being so beautiful, it really, really isn't, because you feel so empty. And yet now, even in the hardest trials, even when I lost my marriages and I didn't know how I was going to feed my children, and I was in really, really dire, difficult situations, it's guidance that keeps your heart alive. There's nothing that can replace the happiness of Imán. There's nothing that could compare to it. So yes, it's always going to be a struggle. This life is a test, but true happiness is in Imán, and nothing can compare to it in freedom of the Western world.
Share us a moment that you felt really you had this strong connection with Allah when you prayed, in those difficult times.
When you're a single mom, it's really, really scary. You have the idea that you'll never be able to get anywhere as a covered woman. You have this perception that a broken home means broken children. And I would cry to Allah, because I knew that I had to get out of those marriages and bi'idhnillah for Allah's sake. And I would pray to Allah to give me strength and to bless my children.
If you had just one dua that you're sure that is going to be accepted, what would that be?
My father's really, really unwell right now, so I'm just praying for his guidance, but no. And to me and my family and my loved ones into Jannah. I mean, that's it. I don't want to make dua for this life. This life is but a test, it's short. My dua would be, especially with what I'm going through with my father, and I really understand it now, how much we just want to meet our loved ones in paradise.
This is Khalila Lister. Thank you so much for your answers, and we learned a lot from your life.
Jazakallah khair so much for having me on this channel and all your amazing work that you do to put forward a needed message in times where it's not heard enough.